Hey guys, Kim here. I just wanted to kind of pop in today and do like an impromptu little video, instead of doing like the big, production of a YouTube video and all that stuff like that. I just kind of want to come in and just talk about some things. And I made a post over on Instagram a couple of days ago over just cultural considerations with the diabetic patient. And not even really just a diabetic patient, any patient for that matter. And I feel very passionate about that because I feel that a lot of times people, when we talk about cultural awareness and we talk about cultural sensitivity and cultural competent care, all those things, I think people's minds go to like, the obvious cultural things. We don't think of culture as like gender, like the culture between men and women. We don't think about it between like regional, like, we live in a country that has different regions. You have the Midwest, you have the Northwest, you have the North, the South, West Coast, and all of these different regions have different flavors, different culture. They share the same similarities. People who grow up there, no matter if you are male, female, black, white, Asian, Latino, if you go to different regions, people who live in that region do a lot of things alike, okay? And so I don't think we always think about culture like that. I think we think about culture just like, okay, between races, and we think about religions and religious practices and stuff like that. And so I wanted to like pop on here and just kind of flesh that out a little bit more because, this is near and dear to my heart. And the reason being is because I'm a part of a couple of demographics that are marginalized, that are underrepresented and not supported and unheard. As you can see, I'm a Black woman, but I'm also a woman who grew up in the South. I was born and raised in Tennessee. And as I have gotten older, I've come across people from all over the world as well as all over, the United States. And there's this stigma that if you're from the South, you're not smart enough. And I've definitely been made fun of for the way that I speak and all that stuff like that. And so my heart is near and dear to the little man. It's near and dear to groups that often feel underrepresented and don't have a voice, And so, anywho, I wanted to kind of flesh that out. And I said something in that post that I wanted to touch on and really explain a little bit more. So this is impromptu, but I did jot down just a couple of notes just in case, so I didn't get tongue tied. I'm already kind of tongue tied, but anyways, but one of the things that I mentioned in that Instagram post was that a lot of the chronic diseases, and I didn't say this exactly, hence why I'm doing this video, but a lot of the reason why you see some chronic diseases in some demographics is not necessarily because of genetics. Okay? Let me say that again. It's not just because of genetics, okay? A lot of it is because of circumstance, okay? Now, I'm not saying that we cast off genetics. I'm not saying that we don't, like, that the guidelines are all wrong. But, I've come across a couple of different articles, and shout out to Pat Mack RN because he be really like, sharing some good stuff. If you don't follow him on Instagram, he's at Pat Mack RN, and he always shares great articles and stuff like that. But one of the things that he shared a couple of articles, and then there were a couple of other nurse practitioners that shared some like, supposed to be scholarly articles, and it was very biased. Like, where'd you get your information from? Who did you talk to? Like, where'd you get this from? And to a point where I'm like, do we live in 2020 or not? Like, really, do we live in 2020 or not? Because, one of the articles insinuated and actually kind of stated that low socioeconomic classes and minorities basically have given up on their health, hence why they're not healthy. You know what I'm saying? I also have seen lots of debate about when it comes to kidney disease and screening, African Americans for kidney disease, which I'm not saying that African Americans don't have a high risk for kidney disease. I'm not saying that. But my biggest point that I want to take away, what I want you to take away, is that you have to, when we look at our patients, we have to look at them as individuals, okay? And we cannot look at them solely as a collective. Key words, solely. Okay, we can't ascribe what we think the collective is to every single person. Okay, and we can't just assume that, okay, people who come from lower socioeconomic classes, if they're a minority, then they just don't care to be healthy. And so, because what happens is, unfortunately, I have come across providers, not just nurse practitioners, but also physicians who are jaded by the patient care, and they'll say things like, well, there's no point in me doing this because they're not going to listen anyway. Why are you even in healthcare taking care of people if you're not going to be hopeful? We all get jaded. We all get tired. We all get tired of saying the same thing over and over again. But if you don't even feel like the patient is going to improve, why should they feel like they're going to improve? I mean, make it make sense. Like, really. I mean, that's really common sense. So anyways, so that's pretty much, that was the main thing, is that one of the things that I really want to stress to people is to understand that there are circumstances that some people in some of these demographics, if not all of the people in the demographics, are standing up against. I can speak for being African American. And I'm just using this as an example, because this could be for any demographic, okay? This could be for gender, this could be for religion, religious practices, this could be for anything, generational, groups, But as African Americans, we see, there's no secret that, it is said that African Americans have a high risk for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, all of it. And I do recognize that there is a genetic component, but there's also a circumstantial component as well, okay? And well, I'm not going to discuss in this video because, I don't feel like everybody is ready to hear that. But some of these circumstances stem back to slavery when it comes to African Americans, especially when it comes to food and food practices. But we'll talk about that for something later. That may not be a conversation that everybody's ready to hear. But what I would say is that even now, and this is not just African Americans, but anybody who lives in an urban area, you have things, this is just an example, as food deserts. That's a real thing. If you don't know what that is, look that up. But a food desert is basically where there's not a substantial amount of food places that like a supermarket. So you have neighborhoods and pockets of places that really all they have are like the corner store, or they have a gas station or something like that. And we all know in those places, you're not going to get fresh produce. You're not going to get meat. What you're going to get is packaged food. You know what I'm saying? That's high in sodium, preservatives, because it's sitting on a shelf. And you got people who, may not have transportation to drive to maybe the neighborhood over or two, or maybe they do have a car, but they have an amount of gas that they can only use until they can re-up again. You know what I'm saying? And so that's circumstantial. You know what I'm saying? And you would not know that if you're not looking at people as individuals. If you were looking at somebody as an individual and you get to know them and you get to know their circumstance, then you would understand, okay, it's not that this person doesn't want to be healthy, it's that they have some things going on. So what are some resources that I can, help them with? you know, and bridge that gap, okay? And this is why, you know, I wanted to just get on here and talk about it, that cultural consideration is very, very important, especially if you're dealing with people. This is important not just in the medical field, this is important in education. Anytime that you're dealing with people and you're servicing people, you got to understand that you have to consider people's culture, their background, you know. And culture is not just about race. It's not just about religious practices. So I think that's about it, guys. I think that's all I got. You know, I hope that fleshed that out a lot more. If, you know, because we are in a time now where there's a magnified look at the disparities against the Black community, if you are somebody who is looking to learn, you know, you can go and you can Google this stuff. I'm not making this stuff up, you know, and it's not just in healthcare, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Systemic racism in finances, in healthcare, in the job market. It's there. It's a real thing. It hasn't just materialized just out of thin air. It just didn't come, you know, it's real. You know what I'm saying? And so if you're willing to learn, want to learn more, I definitely go Google that. But again, I'm using that as an example only because, you know, that's the more obvious thing, and I can relate to that because I'm Black. But then I also can speak to the disparities against women. Okay? You know, like, can we talk about it? You know, I can also talk about the disparities against people from rural America. Because I didn't think I grew up in a rural area. It wasn't until I left my hometown and started meeting other people. I'm like, yeah, this is probably considered a little bit rural. You know what I'm saying? Not only did I grow up that way, but I also did my clinicals, hours and hours and hours with people in rural communities. That's all I did. I went to school in Tennessee. When I did my clinicals, all my clinicals was in rural Tennessee. Okay. And yeah. And then, you know, on top of that, being from the South, you know, even I'll tell y'all a quick story. You know, my husband, who is a Black man, you know what I'm saying? So there you go. You cannot ascribe a certain characteristic of one person to another person, even if they're in the same group. So here it is. I'm a Black woman. I married a Black man, but he grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in the South. And do you know the stories that my husband has told me about the belief of what people in the Midwest think people in the South do? For one, he thought that he was going to come down and see everybody walking around barefoot in overalls with a straw hanging out his mouth. This man really told me that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to tell you about the other one because it do kind of happen, but it does happen down here. But you know, just things like that. You know, people, you know, I've had so many friends as well as myself to go and have jobs in other areas of the country, and people hear them speak. And these are educated people with multiple degrees, and people automatically assume that they're not intelligent. Okay? And so all I'm just trying to say, the takeaway here, as I come in on 14 minutes, is that simply people look at each person as an individual and deal with them as such. That's really it, okay? You know, even within a certain group, a certain racial group, a gender group, a generation, everybody is different and everybody comes with their own unique experiences. Again, using me and my husband. We're both Black people. And yes, we grew up in Black families, but our upbringing was different. So if you were approaching both of us, you wouldn't be able to approach us in the same way. For one, he's a man, I'm a woman. But for two, we grew up in two different regions in our country, and our way of life and the way that we look at life was different, is different still, you know? So I just wanted to leave that with you. I wrote a whole blog post over this that kind of goes into more detail, and I give some practicals with this as well. But I wanted to come on and flesh this out a lot more. I know that people tend to follow me. Well, people do follow me because of diabetes education and management. But I feel like you have to deal with the patient as a whole before you can even start to tell them a care plan. And I know, being Black and being a woman, you don't always trust that the medical professional has your best interest in mind because they don't treat you as an individual. So let's do better, y'all. Let's just do better, okay? All right, guys, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.